Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit. Well, this isn't a review. Specifically, we're going to be doing something a little bit different here since I'm going to be diving into Shiny Shoe Entertainment's Inkbound and its technical test slash recently released demo because there's some interesting things here and I actually got the opportunity to run through this with my editor Hob.
That's me.
Yeah, our good little bean boy helped me go and get to the bottom of what's new in this specific title and how it's setting itself apart from Shiny Shoe's deck-building roguelite Monster Train. Now, admittedly, because this is based off the technical test and the demo and what we know from that, I'm not actually going to be getting super deep into the story, but I will say that the basic introduction to it seems interesting enough. We step into the shoes of a creature known as the Needless. Not the individual creature, more like the creatures in general are known as the Needless, which isn't super promising. How would you like it if I called you Needless?
That'd be pretty crappy. Definitely not a name I would want to associate with, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's the name you're actually stuck with in the game. You're referred to as Needless, and it is what you are historically, since there's been other things like them. And you're accompanied by a little weird pen nib called Quill, or that is a quill.
I know, it's that one's a very clever name. They really thought long and hard about that one.
Oh yeah, and also how like the black and white sort of almost angelic weird entities following you around is Nib and Bin.
I know. Oh, it's so good.
But the basic premise is you're this weird ink boy just sort of spat up from this primordial ooze of ink, and you make your way from the shores of creation to a library of sorts where there's survivors of some sort of post-creative apocalypse, yes, I guess?
Some kind of ink apocalypse.
Yeah, you're like navigating these stories, running these errands for these people while they wait on the Inkbound to sort of solve all their problems for you. You're not the Inkbound. The Inkbound is an actual entity behind locked doors, and you can hear them but never see them. All in all, it's an interesting enough premise. It's definitely different from their prior game, although I wouldn't necessarily say it's fully divorced. There are some small things that I came across that might just be references in passing, things like a broken heartstone, for instance, which, if you're familiar with Monster Train, you'd recognize as one of the upgrades from it, which might imply that the Monster Train game might be one of the books scattered out in the aether of the ink ocean.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I never played Monster Train, so I wouldn't ever notice that.
Oh no, I was completely like staring there and being like, is this a and then there's one of the characters that you can't access who looks a little bit familiar if you played the Awoken faction. But overall, the entire concept is you're essentially walking into these books and sort of scavenging from them for reasons as of yet unknown, and
because they said so.
And it's not just that there's characters at the hub, there's also some characters you'll come across as well. There's the scribe who greets you whenever you dive in, who rather specifically asks you to avoid telling anyone about his presence, which is always a green light. Definitely nothing wrong or terrible can come from interacting with that man.
Yeah, I like him. I'm really curious about what the hell he does specifically.
Right? There's also characters in each of the biomes. If you choose to eschew one of the upgrades that you'd normally be chasing after, you can instead get a potentially worse upgrade, but you get to find out more story elements. Or in theory you would, because I found a character who is supposed to talk shop about the lore in-game and about the items and stuff associated with them, but that feature isn't implemented in the demo right now, so it's a thing. You will eventually get some sweet lore associated with the items, but not right now. But yeah, mostly the game's story progresses from a combination of you talking to NPCs in the hub after a run, or by completing the tasks and quests they go and send you, like you're some sort of underpaid gopher. You're a gopher. Also, they all get bothered because your character can't talk because they have no face. Like, canonically has no face.
Especially the freaking gatekeeper. He is offended by our existence.
I mean, the counselor's also bothered by our existence. I also managed to offend 2 other characters by doing quests where I just, like, found stuff related to dead/gone people and threw it their way. I definitely shouldn't be trusted with, like, looking after the well-being of people. Anyways, that's about the narrative beats so far. I think it's interesting. I'm still not quite sure how things will go insofar as unfurling the story in an organic manner, considering while I was getting small snippets of lore, there was also times where I didn't really have too much to do in the hub after a few runs. There's still a lot of questions to answer in that regards. Plus, the game actually states that it's going to have a story and combat that changes monthly, weekly, and even daily.
That sounds
apparently
cool.
Right. It sounds cool, but I do have a slight concern as to whether or not this means it's going to be having storylines that we'd be able to miss out on or the like, or how we're going to necessarily engage in them. There's a lot of questions to be asked there.
Or I wonder if it's just going to be on like rotation, because if that's the case, that's not too bad.
That, or it might be seasonal stories that you can involve in, and there's a lot that we don't know.
Yeah.
Especially narratively. But there is some things that we can at least talk about, and that's mechanically. So this game fills a niche that I don't think I've seen before, or at least I cannot recall offhandedly, because it is an MMO roguelite that is turn-based action.
Yeah, that's definitely, I would say, pretty unheard of, at least to me too.
You can play this on your own. My first bunch of run-throughs and some later on were done solo running through, and it does seem balanced towards that end. But you can also party up either with strangers or a friend and dive into this game, which has its own little nuances. It is pretty neat here, though. So far, there are 3 character classes implemented: the Magma Miner, the Moss Cloak, and the Weaver. I don't remember if it's called more than the Weaver.
I'm pretty sure it's just called the Weaver.
And there's 2 more. One that's like a little psychic support character, and the other one that's a tank. They're not in, but I could at least look at the moves they had, because they're actually in your little journal / like your notebook that tells you shit. Anyways, all of them are pretty interesting because not only do they have their own little gamut of moves that help them set apart, they also have their own little resource generation as well. So the Magma Miner's whole thing is they get gradually more damaging the more they attack in a turn. So their first hit will hit for like a little bit. Their second hit will hit for more. And then they also have like this massive burst damage move, which will just completely punch someone's clock.
Yeah, that was the one you had where you just one-shotting bosses, right?
Yes, that was the one where I was one-shotting bosses, and I'd actually upgraded it so it did more damage and also gave me more money whenever I one-shot someone. So I was running around with like 2,000 money.
Yeah, that's insane.
After buying everything. Yeah. No, it was good. And then you have the Moss Cloak, whose whole thing is they get shurikens every turn when someone dies or when they crit. So they go really well with anything that builds up crit, because it lets them get the shuriken resource and then empty it all in a special attack that will attack up to a maximum of 10 if they have 10 shurikens. And then there's the Weaver, which is what you played as.
Yes, I did like the Weaver. His whole thing was just like attaching strings to enemies, and the more enemies you string up, the more damage you do, and you can kind of spread the damage between all the enemies. I liked it. It was very crowd control centric.
It wasn't just that either. If you threaded every single enemy in the map, you actually got more energy to take more actions, and you did more damage.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're all interesting and have their own sort of unique identity. But it's not just that basic moveset is what you have to play with. They also have there's no like decks or anything in this. Instead, you have this series of modular upgrades to your 3 basic abilities, plus there's a shared pool of abilities that you can pull from. You get to like draft moves and add them to your bar. You can have a maximum of 5 abilities. So you have this general pool that all the characters share from. There's nothing character specific in the pool of extra abilities you can acquire. But what's really interesting about the abilities is you can evolve them as you find special rooms or beat bosses. And these evolved moves are really fucking useful.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I first saw that. Because I was like, oh, that's just another upgrade for my thing. And it totally just completely changed how it played. I was like, oh, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, no, they'll do things like modify whether your ability can hit more people or not. And it might do stuff like instead of sharing damage with everyone, like that one move he was talking about with the Weaver, it can instead just do massive damage to one specific guy, or it can instead weave everyone before it does damage, which increases the chance of them taking massive damage from things, and also has the logistical thing of, oh, you just got like a whole bunch of people but don't want to individually weave them. You've now woven the entire group. The one thing that's a little bit tricky about it is these upgrades are partially random. They're pulled from a pool for each one of the abilities because there's actually decent handful of evolutions for each of the moves.
Yeah, there is quite a bit.
But it's then compounded because not only can the moves evolve, they also have augment slots. And they can hold 3 augments, which in turn all have their own little modular upgrades. So you can have something like your shuriken, which you evolve to be poisonous, and it does extra poison when you crit. And then on that, you can put an ability that does extra poison damage to someone that's not been poisoned, adds 2 stacks of poison on top of that, and does increased crit chance, which ups its overall damage and also ups the chance that you're just stacking heaps of poison on you. Can you tell what I was doing last night? So it's really interesting for the flexibility that you have to go and actually modify these characters to be like a cohesive build. And you actually still have a bit more control over this too, because you can actually re-roll which abilities you've been provided access to. It does take a currency that I wasn't able to trace how much you had. I was looking for like where it was because it's these little purple triangles. But
oh yeah, I have no idea what the heck those. Where
they're dropped by bosses when you kill them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't actually see how many I had at a given time. So I was just like,
Just somewhere in
I
the
feel
abyss.
like it's fine. It's fine. Anyways, so you have those, and that's sort of how you get a little bit less randomness and a better control over what you're doing at a given time. That said, that's not the extent of your character building either. Like I said, you can draft a couple new abilities and sort of mess around with what you have access to for your character's build, but there's also relics, vestiges that you can get from chests along the way, or from shops by spending quillings. I think it was quillings was the money.
Yeah, it's quillings.
Not shillings, quillings.
Quillings.
But yeah.
They're really going far with these names.
Really, yeah, it's just the whole thing is like you have all these relics essentially that you can use to help further flesh out your character. They're a bit interesting because there's a bunch of generic ones, but you also have some character specific relics. You can actually unlock more relics as you do some of those tasks / quests that the characters send you out on. There's also like the ability to actually unlock some of the more powerful relics during a run, but I wasn't sure if that was just a one-time thing that let you sort of try out what the relic was, or if there was a way to like replicate that happening. But I would just have like a super powerful relic like drop on my lap once in a blue moon. I was like, oh, yes, I would like this.
Oh, I think that was from like completing quests mid-run. They just dropped. I think that's what that was.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit interesting. It gives you the option to play around with some really powerful tools. That said, it's probably not something you should rely on to save the day.
Yeah, some of the quests are actually kind of hard though. Like the fully upgrade the whatever. That's your quest.
Oh, the bindings.
Yeah,
Fully
yeah,
upgrade the
fully
bindings
upgrade your
requires
bindings.
you to. I think it requires you to evolve the binding, which your abilities are called bindings. And then it requires you to slot 3 augments into that binding, which means you have to like expressly choose the same one over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Which, like I said, bit annoying, bit hard.
It's a little bit easy if you don't pick up an extra move. Guaranteed to get like enough bindings to max it to and have some change.
See, well,
If
that's
you ignore
boring.
everything else.
What kind
Well,
of?
I mean-
what kind of loser is only gonna just stick with like, your original 3 moves?
But yeah, I think it was pretty interesting. There's some pretty specific differences from this and other roguelites. For one thing, while you do have like, you have to make decisions between several points of like area difficulty and what resources they're granting you. Like you might have the choice between a normal fight and a hard fight, and one might give you money and the other one might give you potions, which incidentally, you have super limited consumable slots, but it's not a big problem because you can backtrack. Because while you're choosing these areas, you can still backtrack to pick up any resources you've lost or weren't able to pick up because of limited inventory space at the time.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that you can only pick up like two whole items and that's it.
That said, it isn't just like the limitation in the consumable part that's a problem, because you lose anything you're not holding on to when you switch biomes, but those consumable slots also share spots with keys, which you need to access some really important vaults that have like
that's
powerful
right, they do,
messages.
don't they?
Yeah, no, they
God.
entirely do. And while it's viable to just like throw a key on the ground and come back to pick it up if there's a key vault in the run you're currently in, that's a big fucking if.
Yeah.
That's a whole ass thing that you have to do there. Again, it's nice that you can backtrack. I think it's actually a really neat feature, especially in case something's like way too much money for you and you got it early in the run, like a shopkeeper or one of the augment binding things that would let you evolve a binding. Being able to just jog back there when you're at the tail end of a specific biome, very nice.
It's honestly not even that bad of a trek either. The biomes aren't like super long like some games are, so doubling back really doesn't take that much time anyway.
The length mostly comes from the fact that over the course of your run, you have to go through like 3 of the currently 6 biomes before you tackle the boss. Like each of the biomes have their own little mid-boss, but like you're aiming to take down they're actually called villains. So I assume they're sort of like a story book villain is essentially the idea behind them. Makes sense.
As the game comes closer to release, they'll start adding more story and explain more.
Yeah, I imagine they'll explain more. But yeah, there's currently just the one boss. I believe there's 3 villains planned, but who knows if they'll end up with more or not. And who knows if they'll end up having like an actual extra boss if you get deep enough in it. Who fucking knows? That said, it was, I think, interesting enough. They have some interesting mechanics for the bosses to at least prevent you from obliterating them in one hit. Their health bars have segments, and extra damage doesn't really roll over into that frequently. It instead triggers more mechanics when you hit those designated points.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the fucking Kraken boss is just like, oh yeah, I have 60% damage resistance at first.
Yep.
Fuck that guy. He can still die horribly to status damage though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, regardless, once you get there, he's not really that hard anyway.
He can be a problem if you like are playing ranked mode, because okay, we've been talking about basic mode, but and that's like unranked, but then you get ranked and it starts to get a bit more difficult because you get modifiers before you pick the biome you're going through. So like each time you're going to advance, you have a choice of 3 biomes to go through, which influences the type of enemies that you're coming across, as well as the mid-boss and, just how the area looks. What's really important about it though in ranked is it also influences things like the modifier for the rest of the run, and you'll have to pick up 3 of these. You'll get stuff like whenever you would pick up the little energy orbs that give you reduced cooldowns on your abilities and extra energy, you take damage. Whenever you kill an enemy, all other enemies get a shield equal to 15% of their health. There's another one that's when a boss hits half health, it gains the shield and also purges all status effects off it.
Might as well just heal it back to full health at that point.
Nah, I mean, it was a little bit of a pain in the ass in my poison run, but I just knocked it down to 60% health and then watched the poison hit it for like a bajillion. That actually worked on like the not big boss. The big boss, I think it still skipped like a phase on the boss. One of the chunks just vanished.
Did you really? That's
yeah,
awesome.
well, I got the dash that doubled poison damage.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, and then I had basic shuriken that did poison damage, and then I had the ultimate that did like poison damage on every hit. So I was just, and I got like
an insane amount of poison.
The extra ability I picked up also gave poison, and then I got the ability that you plant a little plant and it gives you energy. So I had more actions to layer poison on people. That was it. That was the entirety of like the bullshit I was doing. Anyways, so ranked is interesting though, because you have like to pick between these modifiers for how you're fucking over the run as you move forward, and then you also have your overall rank modifiers. So as you clear ranked mode, you start to get like bronze and bronze 2, and this makes things stronger, such as like 15% extra enemy health or extra difficulty modifier. Like the actual difficulty modifiers themselves will be ramped up. It goes to silver 3 right now. I thought it was a little bit annoying though, because the way they deal difficulty isn't like how it's dealt with in like Slay the Spire or Monster Train. It doesn't give you the option to tackle higher difficulties whenever you clear it. It requires you to generate enough experience by clearing runs to go to the next rank, so it's a little bit of grinding there. And you don't actually seem to have the option to like dial back to an easier rank afterwards. I'm not actually sure if losing would cause me to lose experience in that rank, but
you're just stuck on too hard of a rank.
I mean, it's your fault for, I guess, getting there. I mean, you could play non-ranked mode. Non-ranked mode doesn't have any of the modifiers. I liked challenging ranked mode. I unironically liked fighting the hard and Slay the Spire, so I guess this should be expected.
Yes. So you brought that upon yourself, really.
I guess. Anyways, I think it's honestly an interesting thing, though. I sort of talked a little bit about combat, but I should actually get into it because we're talking about going through the runs. Basically, combat plays out where you're sort of given the option to click this little icon. It starts up combat, a whole bunch of monsters come in, and the game promptly becomes turn-based. You get a certain amount of energy for your turn, and moving or taking an action spends energy. And you'll actually get to see where the enemies are attacking or what their effective attack range is. So you can spend your energy to tactically smack them and then move out of the way of their attacks, or to try and kill them before their attack goes off in order to clear a safe space for yourself. And it's made even more interesting though, because as you're fighting enemies and turns pass by, the arena gets smaller. Basically, this sort of pool of ink just slowly condenses in, and if you're standing in the ink while you take an action, you take damage. And while a lot of
that one out the hard way.
And while a lot of the damage numbers you'll see from enemies are fairly small, you actually have a pretty small default health pool, which means all of this ends up making a large difference. There are relics and events that you can use to power yourself up. I actually had, because of a relic that gave me extra health whenever I want to fight. Like, I ended one round with 97 health.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was just a dumb experiment. It wasn't even like an efficient use of relics, but I was like, huh. Anyways, the overall thing though is like, so you're having to like carefully manage your energy and your movement and everything to try and whittle down through enemies. And you also have to be careful, because once you kill like enough enemies from a certain round, the next wave will spawn in as well. So you can end up with way too many enemies to deal with if you're not efficiently taking them down. But what's worse is if you also happen to stall things out to try and whittle everyone down, the enemy's going to be closing in, and you can actually buy yourself time by killing everyone. If everyone is down when a turn ends, the arena doesn't seem to condense.
Just gives you a little bit of breathing room. So you definitely, it sounds like you want to kill all the enemies as soon as you can, really.
Yeah, if you can. But
Yeah,
if you're too reckless about it, you'll end up with way more enemies than you were really ready for. And if you're just taking your sweet ass time, you're going to have no room to navigate around a potentially large amount of enemies later.
Yeah, I know that was my problem when I was playing as the Weaver, because I really liked setting everything up and then just looking at fat damage between all the enemies. But then before I knew it, I was just freaking surrounded in the smallest little safe area of the pit. I was just like, oh no.
I also thought it was pretty interesting how co-op works, because each character, their turns sort of happen simultaneously for players, which is a tiny bit dangerous when you have enemies that have special abilities. Like, they take their action after a player takes 2 actions.
Oh yeah, like their counterattacks.
Moving out of the way of that shit sort of feels necessary. But yeah, no, there's definitely some very interesting factors there, because you can actually synergize between each other. If you had 2 people playing as the Moss Cloak, for instance, both with the poison doubling dash, I imagine things would get super fucking dumb, super fucking fast. So earlier on, I talked about grind in so far as how it deals with ranking in the ranked mode. But that wasn't the only bit of grinding that was in the game. There was also the season experience. I don't know if you actually like dabbled or poked around much at that hop.
Not too much, because I don't really care about the season
rewards.
pass, which is what it seems like that was going for anyway.
I mean, you don't need a season pass for like half the rewards. So basically how it works is there's seasons in this game, or there's going to be, which is definitely an eyebrow raise, I think, to both of us. But the idea is you gain experience towards these rewards by playing the game, doing certain quests and goals, like the daily missions, etc. And you'll get emotes, cosmetics for your character, and yeah, that's about it. There didn't actually seem to be anything that was actually important or that would impact gameplay in like an actual mechanical fashion. So I didn't overly care. That said, it definitely seemed like there was going to be the implementation of a cash shop, given the actual little cash shop thing in the top right corner.
Given the actual cash shop.
yeah. And the fact that there is a separate tier of season pass items, which seems to imply that you'll have something to invest in. And it's part of the thing where I'm like, I'm hoping that the season pass isn't actually tied to things on like an actual mechanical sense or a narrative sense.
On the bright side, the cash shop seems to be cosmetic only anyway, so it's not a huge deal unless
it changes, because we're still in the demo technical sense. There's a lot of questions we don't have. I'm actually trying to reach out to the development team right now in order to get some more answers as to how they're going to be tackling the organic gameplay, what the actual season pass and everything means for the game at large, how far into, the game as a service route they're going to potentially go to. Like, I'm hoping it's just you buy the base game and you can opt into a season pass if you really want cosmetics, and that's it. If that's the whole of it,
if they're gonna make you pay for the game, they better go that route, to be honest.
Right? But yeah, no, that's the whole bit. Like, if it's just cosmetic stuff, I could care less. I know that it'll upset some people who really want those fucking cosmetics. I mean, there are some really funny, goofy options in the cosmetics. Like, both me and Hop have little cat heads because we unlock those. And
yeah, I was gonna say, you can still unlock some regardless.
Yeah, no, like I said, the cosmetics, like the season levels, are 2-tiered. There's your free tier, and then there's you have a season pass tier.
Yeah, it's like every other like live service game in existence now.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, you can customize your character. Like, you can get a custom weapon based on your class. You can get your little mask. You can get a different colored fairy to follow you around. I have a dance emote
Mm-hmm.
It's very cute.
This is gonna be the new Fortnite.
Oh God. But yeah, no. I mean, customization is actually pretty okay. I think the game looks good at large, honestly. Like, I really like the game's aesthetic.
I think the customization, if you want to go back to that, goes beyond okay. At least your character customization, all the face stuff you can do. But yeah, I liked the customizations. I liked they didn't go super far, but they gave you a fair amount of options for the face. You have a bunch of different, I don't know why they did it like this, but shapes to stamp onto the face, and you can resize them and give them different colors. And I'm sure some people more creative than both me and Arlie could do something funny with that. I just made a basic ass face on my character. I was like, oh good, 2 circles, 2 more circles in the center for the eyeballs, and then eyebrows. The end.
I mean, I think I actually got an okay face. You just can't see it often because it's a cat head.
I mean, that's true. Why would you even need to customize your face when you can just have the cat head?
Right?
Forget
like,
everything
all they
I
have
just said.
They just need to give me like the Daft Punk helmet or like the Dead Mouse one, and that's it.
Yes.
That's how we're... Anyways, other than that, the only other aesthetic thing I have to say is like there's some voice work in this one. I actually think it's pretty good for the narrator. Narrator is a nice smooth voice.
He does have a pretty nice voice.
And the music's fun. That's it. It's not.
Yeah, it's definitely game music.
Yeah, nothing that really jumped out at me so far. It could be because I keep playing this game when it's like 5 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. or whatever. Also, that's because of Hob.
What do you mean that's because of me?
That's totally because you're like, hey, the only time we can play together is like post midnight after my stream, and it's like 3 a.m. and I'm just like, fuck.
You were the one that kept going. I stopped at 3 o'clock.
We needed footage. Anywho,
thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you enjoy our efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the Hit the subscribe button.
Do you need some help?
No, yeah, I know how to read. I promise.
No. We heard you try and usurp the show. We're getting me back now. For the Discord savvy folks, there's a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, in the video description, and to my Patreon, so you can support us and
us together.
Us together. Yes. Also to my Twitch if you want to see me get dunked on in indie games live. That said, I'll catch you folks on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then,
folks.
Bah.